It's 9 o'clock, and we know what that means. It's time to get started. The first 5 teams can go ahead and put their devices onto the fixture. And in the meantime, I will explain a couple of things to everyone else and to everyone in the class as well, so that we all know and understand the same rules and how it all works. So the picture that I have up above me currently should be familiar to everyone in the class, and it should look somewhat similar to what we see in the fixture here to the right. What we have is this year's challenge is that all the devices were designed so that they could fit in this region that's labeled as number 1 up on the up above. They have to fit above in 12 inches of length. They can be no taller than 23 inches tall, and they cannot touch the base of the fixture. So everything has to be supported on the stringers that you see there. The next thing that has to happen is the TAs will open the gate, which is the metal bar that you see in the front. Once that gate opens, the devices have to move on their own, and they have to move to that area that you see labeled there as with the number 3 and the number 4 in there, which we normally just call region 2. So there's a region 1, which is 12 inches width, and then they have to move into that region 2. And during any of that time, no part of the device can actually touch the base of the fixture. So it has to ride completely on the stringer itself. Then, once that device is moved completely into that section, and only after it's completely moved into that section, then they have to turn on the light switch. And turning on the light switch in this particular case means flipping the light switch down. And when you flip the light switch down, then the light basically goes on. So that's how you can see if a device has actually accomplished that. So that's the most simple way to describe what we're going to be doing. There is a much more detailed description. I think it's about 8 pages long, and it goes into all kinds of specific cases. What I want to do is just make sure that everyone's aware of the main rules. The first set of rules have to do with being allowed to compete. In order to be allowed to compete, your team had to pass a safety inspection, and I'm glad to report that all devices were able to pass that safety inspection. The next thing is all the devices had to weigh less than 3 pounds, and I'm happy to report that all the devices weighed less than 3 pounds. The third thing is that all the devices had to meet the size requirements, i.e. they had to fit in that first section, and we'll double check that, or the TAs will double check that when they're on the fixture, but I think we should be okay there as well. So that means the devices are allowed to start. Then, in order not to be disqualified from the round, the next set of things that have to happen is the devices must stay in their own lane, i.e. they must stay on the stringer, they can't fall off, and they also can't interfere with the devices that are on the adjacent stringers. So, and then finally, they have to operate in a way that they don't actually damage the fixture itself. So you can't really have wheels that keep spinning and therefore producing tire marks on the side of the stringers, things of that nature. So, if all devices accomplish that, then we get into actually doing the things that should be happening. And this goes back to the set of things that I showed you before. The device has to successfully complete as many tasks in order, and we allow 30 seconds for that process from the time that the TAs lift the starting gate. And basically it has to fit, it then has to start, it has to move, the entire device moves to what I'll call region 2, and once it's moved completely to region 2, then it needs to flip the switch. If 2 devices accomplish the same number of tasks, it is not the fastest device that wins. The device that wins is the device that is then the lowest in weight. And so this was quite a challenge. The thing I should point out is that you know, here it is. We go through all these classes where we learn all of this theory. Then in this design class, we get all kinds of design theory, but where it really gets interesting, where it both gets fun and it turns into real engineering, is when you get to the point where you actually have to build something and it has to work. And in this case, this particular challenge, it's unique. It wasn't like you could find any other device that had to compete in the same competition, because I don't think anyone's ever done anything quite the same way. It's done in teams, so it has all the challenges of making sure that you can work well as a group, and we only allow 45 days from the time we announce the competition until today. Now there are some rewards, and this is why we're here, and I know that many of you are aspiring to some of these. First place gets an automatic A for the class. Second place gets an A for the project and 100 for the final, doesn't need to take the final. And third place gets an A for the project, which means that for the first 3 teams, the project report doesn't matter. For all 37 other teams, you'll primarily be judged on the project report rather than being judged on how things happen today, and I'll explain the primarily in just a minute. For all of you, the objective here is to have a somewhat realistic experience of building something and being able to make it work. And for everyone here, we hope that this is going to be a very fun event. Now, a couple of items to note. On the top 3 teams, you don't automatically get that grade. You also, next Tuesday, have to come to class and explain to everyone else how your device works. This is how we all learn. So that's a good thing to be doing as well. And then remember how I said that for the other teams, your grade is primarily based on the report? Well, it turns out primarily is 98 out of 100 points. There are 2 out of 100 points based on how your device works today. And in particular, on whether your device accomplishes the following objectives in the competition today. First off, meeting all those requirements in order to be allowed to compete, not being disqualified. But thirdly, and more importantly, being able to have the device move autonomously the way in which it's supposed to, entirely into this second region, which starts at the point that you see here. So the device has to start behind and it has to move all the way into this region without ever going out of bounds, without doing anything else. And that's really important, and every device gets 3 attempts at doing that. There are 2 attempts because the competition is double elimination, and any devices that don't accomplish that in the first 2 attempts, there will be a 3rd attempt that we will have before the finals in order to validate that as well. Now, in order to run all of this, we have some judges, and all of you should have now been familiar with all 6 of us. Bob and I are the primary judges. Bob is the person who has put together the entire order in which we run all of the heats, and he will be tracking all of this and handling that piece of it. I'm kind of the final arbiter on any decisions that end up getting made, but the primary 2 people who will judge how every round comes out is Amit and Brent, who are the 2 TAs, and they're the ones in shorts, so they're easy to recognize as well. And then we have 2 what I'll call returning veterans who are here as well, who are primarily responsible for, they were responsible for the check-in, and they will also be handling a lot of the logistics in terms of which teams are up next, what lanes you're running into. So they're running the signboard that you see over here to the left, which has all of those numbers on that, and that's Laurent. Laurent has, I think this is her 5th year that she's been involved in this competition. She was a TA, I think, for about 4 of those years and has kept coming back ever since. And John Sorkin actually competed in this about 5 years ago, and their device did extremely well in that particular case. So he understands this competition as well. So just to give you an idea of the flow of the day, in the first 40 minutes, every device will run. So we will be basically running heats of 5 teams, and that will be run so there'll be 8 heats, and we're basically running in numerical order. Once we have done that, there will be 8 teams that have won in those first 8 heats, and we will then run those 8 teams until there is 1 team left out of that elimination. So that runs next. Then every team that has lost once or lost in the first round will run again a second time, and that's that blue area that you see at the bottom there. Once that's done, then we basically have an elimination of those teams that are coming up through those brackets, and that has fed into it teams that won initially and then lost in the earlier elimination so that they can come back in and still be in the finals as well. Once we have finished that area that is in the purple, we will take all of the teams who have now run twice and have not moved into that second region, and we will be running those teams for their third attempts. And we'll organize that when we get to that stage in terms of which teams will run when. But it doesn't really matter in terms of the competition, it only matters in terms of the report. And that gives some time to the 3 teams that remain to get ready for the finals. And we expect that we should be finishing somewhere around 12:30 in terms of the entire competition. Now, the logistics for each round, what you want to do is watch the board that is over here to my left, because that will tell you which team is going to be running next. If your team is next, you can get ready to move to the staging area, because as soon as a round is done, then we'll be swapping over. And in fact, in some cases, if there's seats, you can actually start moving into the staging area. After the previous round finishes, the teams that have just finished can pick up their device off the fixture. You can't come to the fixture until after the time is up and the winner's been declared. But then you can come pick up your fixture,